Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to our second dialogue of Humanity Rising. We had our inaugural session yesterday. It was a splendid liftoff for a global endeavor that is seeking to transform the crisis of the pandemic that we're in into an opportunity for human renewal. And as we said, that every day between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock p.m. Central European time, that's 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific time in the West Coast of the United States, we'll be broadcasting so that people from all over the world on a daily basis as the pandemic unfolds and beyond the pandemic can come together to share what they're going through, strategize together on how we can become more effective, share their visions and stories of a positive future, their solutions for what they're actually doing on the ground to make a fundamental difference in people's lives. Because the challenge and the theme of Humanity Rising is transforming conversations that matter into actions that make a difference. One of the things that we did at the beginning and the end is we had a very short meditation of heart coherence. We've been trying to think of a way that we can all come together. We can't be in person. We're in a virtual community. Over 97 different countries are present. We had 20,000 people that were participating yesterday. We have more people joining overnight and into the day today, more organizations, more individuals. And the way we want to start every session is just to take a minute and breathe deep and center your attention on your heart. See if you can actually hear your heartbeat. And in a spirit of gratitude for simply being alive at this time, open your heart to everyone else in Humanity Rising, your friends, your community, the world. Take 60 seconds. Thank you. Thank you. I always feel better when I've stilled myself and opened my heart in a spirit of gratitude. It stabilizes me, and it has a very powerful and positive effect on all aspects of our body and heart and mind. One of the things that we announced yesterday as we're getting started with Humanity Rising is that we want to honor the voices of women. So a centerpiece of our inaugural session, for those of you who didn't have a chance to see it, was a women's circle. I had gone through a thought experiment while I was sitting here in Amsterdam in lockdown. If I was dictator for a day, and I could make one decision for the post-pandemic world, what would it be? And my first thought was to keep all the oil in the ground, and stop the deforestation of the Amazon. There were two ideas that occurred to me. And then I realized that that just stops a crisis, but it actually doesn't change much. What would I do if I could make one decision that would change everything? And throughout the day, I contemplated various things. And then I came to the conclusion that the one thing I would do is to order that within the next 30 days, all executive leadership of every country, every organization and institution, company in the world be transitioned over to women. And that women should be in essential leadership of the world between now and 2030. This next decade is critical in determining the quality of human survival. And that was what gave us the impulse to have a woman's circle in the opening night. And then for the next 9 days, we're going to listen to women from all over the world, from every walk of life. And then we're, for 7 days, going to listen to young people from all over the world, from all kinds of different organizations. What do they have to say? The empowerment, the radical empowerment of women, and I would add youth, is critical if we're going to give shape to a post-pandemic world that is sustainable, resilient, and aligned with natural systems. We wanted to give, I would say, pride of place, first place, to the Indigenous women, because the Indigenous women from around the world are at the front lines of the struggle for climate justice, dealing with the pandemic in which we all find ourselves. And so we turned to Osprey Orielle Lake, who was on the opening panel last night. She's the founder and the director of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network International. And I personally don't know of any other woman who is so consistently, selflessly, and intentionally in the front lines with the Indigenous women, empowering them worldwide to take action in these critical areas of concern. So I want to turn it over to her. I would just add that because of the challenges of getting many of these Indigenous women to the right place at the right time all together, many of them live beyond the internet. We couldn't make it for today, so we, Osprey very generously recorded these sessions with them. And Osprey is live with us. She'll be answering any questions or comments that you want to make in the chat. And then Osprey will be available when it's over in just under 2 hours time to take any questions or comments that you might want to make at that time live. So thank you all. Welcome to Indigenous women on the front lines of climate change and the COVID pandemic.
Hi, everyone. My name is Osprey Orielle Lake, and I am the founder and executive director of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network, or WECAN. And it's truly an honor to join all of you for the Humanity Rising Global Summit. Just to give you a little bit of background before we dive into the session, WECAN is very focused, as you can hear from the title, on working with women around the world on these very key issues of the climate crisis, and also now COVID-19, which we see as very connected together. If you want to learn more about why we're focusing on women's leadership, I would really suggest that you go ahead and check out our website at wecaninternational.org, where we have a plethora of information around what women are doing on the front lines of climate change, from the policy level to the grassroots organizing. And what's exciting about the website is you can actually learn a lot about why and how women are leading, and why we decided that this was a really important intersection for us to work at the nexus of women and climate change. Of course, we work with men, and everyone's voices are needed, but this is really the time of women rising, and due to gender inequality, we really see a need to lift up the voices of women and also across the entire gender spectrum, and realize that those voices have not been heard, and yet they're essential, and we can't get to sustainability and this new vision we want coming out of this big moment, this big epic crisis, without women's voices being at the forefront. At WECAN, we do a variety of projects and campaigns, from tree plantings to policy at the UN climate talks. We're working in a wonderful coalition for a feminist agenda for the Green New Deal, really forward-thinking, not just in the United States, but a global Green New Deal. And for this summit, however, we're going to focus on work that I'm really passionate about and we think is essential, which is lifting up the voices of Indigenous women leaders at this time. And I think when we go into the session, you'll see why this is so critical. I'm going to open the session first with a very short 5-minute video, and it has two components. The first part is going to focus on our Women for Forests program, which involves working in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where we're working on reforestation of damaged forests. We also work in the Tongass rainforest in Alaska, and also in the Amazon in Brazil and Ecuador. So this segment is going to focus on some work we're doing with the very powerful Indigenous woman leader, Sonia Guajajara from Brazil. And the Amazon could be not more important right now to protect for all of us in terms of Indigenous rights, Indigenous peoples, but also the entire ecology of our Mother Earth. And then the second part of the video will delve into our work with the Indigenous Women's Divestment Delegations, which we do in leadership with the Divest, Invest, Protect project, which is run by Michelle Cook, a very powerful Dene human rights lawyer. So you're going to be hearing a little bit about that work. It's a very critical time that while we move forward with all the visions and ideas and plans that we have to build a healthy and just world, we also need to really address the fact that if we can't keep fossil fuels in the ground, we're really not going to be able to adhere to the Paris Climate Agreement. And this divestment work is very centered on how to get financial institutions to move their money out of investing in fossil fuel companies. So that's asset manager, insurance companies, banks. How can they move their money out of these very polluting industries into a clean and healthy regenerative future? So, and after that, we will delve into the main component of this session, which is an incredible panel of amazing women leaders working across North America or Turtle Island, who are working on the front lines of the dual crisis of COVID-19 and the ongoing fossil fuel extraction that is happening even as we face this crisis. So I think that'll be a really powerful time to listen to these women and also to hear from them as they share valuable knowledge about how we can move forward at this time and share their worldviews and their spiritual, ecological knowledge with all of us. So thank you so much for joining us.
A conjuntura política brasileira é muito grave para toda a população, em especial para nós mulheres. E agora temos um presidente que acha que as mulheres têm que ter papel secundário, salários menores. Está aqui participando do Fórum Permanente da ONU, em frente à Embaixada do Brasil, para nós tem um significado muito forte. Porque é reafirmar a presença e a existência indígena em todos os espaços.
Brazil is the deadliest country in the world for environmental defenders. Since the election of Bolsonaro, there has been an increase in the killings of indigenous peoples in Brazil. These are their lands, their forests that they have maintained. So it is up to all of us to be protecting Indigenous rights. It's the morally correct thing to do, to help our Indigenous sisters and brothers when they're under attack. But also for all of us, because of the climate, we need to protect the Amazon rainforest.
Bolsonaro, ainda parlamentar, ele falou que a cavalaria do Brasil era incompetente. Competente é a cavalaria norte-americana que conseguiu exterminar todos os indígenas. É muito urgente que o mundo escute a voz dos povos indígenas do Brasil. Estamos aqui para reafirmar que a luta pela Mãe Terra é a mãe de todas as lutas. Amazon is not for sale. The Amazon is not for sale. The Amazon is not for sale. Indigenous
The decisions you make as Credit Suisse and the Swiss people affect those of us downstream from your actions. You sit here comfortably in your privilege, while our communities bear the risks of your investments with our very health, our lives. We face a future without clean water as you reap your dividends and returns. What do you as Swiss people hold sacred? To us, water is life, to all of us.
We are here today to let Credit Suisse and all of the other banks that are financing these projects that we have not given our consent, that we find water and clean air and land to be critical infrastructure, not pipelines. We're all citizens of this planet, and what happens in our homelands will affect the people here in Switzerland.
For over a year and a half, we have tried to pursue all legal avenues possible, petitioning our state and federal agencies to conduct environmental impact studies, yet we have been unheard. And our resistance to this corporate colonialism that is tied to carbon extraction is growing, especially during these times where corporations are influencing our government to pass laws restricting our rights. What changes has Credit Suisse made to its due diligence and risk assessment processes following Dakota Access Pipeline?
Investing in a company is just that, whether it's project level or corporate level financing. We need you to stop financing these dangerous companies. Two of the banks our delegation also met with, UBS and DNB, who we provided the same exact information to, chose not to renew their credit facilities with ETP. Yet Credit Suisse has taken no action and has made no statement.
Not once in these calculations of profits is the loss of Indigenous peoples' culture on this planet mentioned as a risk. Credit Suisse has a choice to do the right thing. So until then, Indigenous peoples will continue to wage and escalate a mass globalization, calling for accountability of Credit Suisse in the financial industry. We will call for divestment, we will call for a boycott, we will call for the sanction of Credit Suisse for these Indigenous human rights violations by these oil companies that you are supporting by any and all means necessary.
This is Osprey, Orielle Lake with the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network, and welcome to this webinar. I'm really honored to have so many amazing speakers join us today and to share their stories and knowledge with us. And also all of you from all over the world really calling in for this really important conversation on Indigenous women on the front lines of COVID-19 crisis and the climate crisis, and really the intersection of what this moment really means right now in terms of fossil fuel resistance and also the work that's going on in their community. So thank you so much for joining us. Some of you are very new to the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network, and I don't want to take a great deal of time on this call to talk about our organization because I feel like we have more important things to talk about right now with this important conversation. But just to mention that We are founded upon 4 principles of women's rights, Indigenous rights, the rights of nature, and rights of future generations. And that's really the foundation pillars of our work that we've been doing for about a decade now. And we really feel that it's so important to really lift up the voices of women. And if you go to our website, and Catherine, you can go ahead and put the link to our website in the chat. We have a lot of information about the role of women's leadership around the world and why it's so essential right now. And I think Indigenous women are some of the most important voices we need to listen to all over the world now, with all these different events and transitions of what's happening in our society and culture right now. So I'm particularly honored to have these speakers here today to talk to us about their wisdom and knowledge and their struggles in their communities. But I also just wanted to note that you might have been seeing circulating on social media that, you know, some of the countries that are doing the best in terms of the challenge of the COVID-19 crisis are women, women leaders. So I think that's something that we really need to flag and note. This is part of a series of conversations that WECAN is hosting under the umbrella of A Just and Healthy World is Possible. So we've been having a lot of these conversations, and we will be continuing to do so. And it's a way that we can reach out to all of you and connect during this really challenging time. And I did want to just, you know, take a breath and note, you know, that there's a lot of folks struggling, and we want you to know that we care about your health. We care about your safety. We hope that you're doing well. We know folks are really struggling. Some people have lost their jobs. Other people are not having food. Other people are not having access to water. People keep saying we need to wash our hands. Well, not everybody even has soap and water. Some people have lost loved ones. Some people are grieving. So there's a variety of manners in which we know that this moment is very, very challenging. So also please know we want to hold you in a space of love and care in this moment and kindness. We also really deeply appreciate all the folks on the front lines. You know, big shout out to the grocery workers, the people who are the farmers, people working in the fields, the nurses and doctors who are right on the front lines, literally risking their lives to keep things moving so that we can be taken care of, so we can have food. I sure hope folks are starting to grow food. At this time, I think Mother Earth is really letting us know we need to get localized. So yeah, just a big shout out for all those folks working so hard on the front lines of this crisis, of this pandemic. And I think it would be really remiss to say that a lot of what's happening is very unjust and uneven. We know that frontline communities, Indigenous peoples, people of color, low income are being impacted first and worst because, of course, during these crises, these cracks in the system and these injustices are deeply amplified. And we really want to note that this is not, you know, we've been seeing things like we're all in this together. Well, some of that's true, but we're not all in this together equally. And we really need to call that out. And I know our speakers will be addressing those issues. So I'm going to make a few contextualizing comments before we get started. But I wanted to first and foremost introduce our speakers in the order that they're going to be presenting. We're really, really honored in their very busy schedules that they've taken time to be with us today. So first, we're going to be hearing from Houska. She is Anishinaabe. She's a tribal attorney and founder of the Giniw Collective. And she's been working on Line 3 pipeline resistance for a really long time. Powerful leader, and super honored to have her here today. And then we'll be hearing from Freda Huson. She is Chief Howihkat. She is from Unist'ot'en of the Wet'suwet'en people. She's a leader and spokesperson resisting the coastal GasLink pipeline. And then we'll be hearing from Faith Spotted Eagle. She is Dakota and Nakota, and has been fighting the Keystone XL pipeline, Dakota Access Pipeline, is powerful resistance leader as well. We'll be hearing from her knowledge. And also then we will be hearing from Eriel Deranger. She is Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation, Executive Director of Indigenous Climate Action. and has been doing enormous work organizing up in Canada and working on tar sands extraction, and is a resistance leader as well. And I'm just getting a message I need to check. So at this moment of Indigenous communities experiencing really the devastating impact of COVID-19 pandemic, we're also knowing that they're facing fossil fuel extraction and pipeline struggles. And Indigenous people are at a higher risk of contracting COVID-19 due to a lack of resources and health disparities. And we know this is brought on because of ongoing colonial policies and environmental racism. And so we really need to center their voices. We're seeing the shock doctrine, as Naomi Klein talks about, in full force right now, with governments and corporations taking advantage of crises to do land grabs and to also push forward a lot of these pipelines and extractive industries. And we really need to learn how to mobilize now that we are sheltered in place. How do we fight back? How do we really have our resistance movement stay strong in the face of this shock doctrine modality that our governments are in? And it's really outrageous to see this kind of activity when people are in crisis. I think it's really, really heartbreaking and insane that we're also seeing these bailout by governments going to the fossil fuel industry, going to corporations, going to the 1%, these kinds of bailouts that are going to industry instead of going to the people. We super need to put pressure on our governments to ensure that funding is going to the front lines, it's going to workers, is going to our communities. So this is something we're also working on at WECAN in terms of our divestment work, and also working really hard to put pressure on our governments to do the right thing. We also know that it's really important that we hear today from all of the women specifically about what's happening with Keystone XL, Line 3, and the Coastal GasLink pipeline, what's happening with tar sands extraction. And as I mentioned, I think Indigenous women leader voices, their activities are so key to all of us at this time, both in terms of what's happening on the front lines in their territories, but also because of their traditional ecological knowledge, their wisdom, their years and years of resistance, and to really acknowledge that we are, those of us who are not Indigenous are, guests in their territories. And that has not worked out so well. So I really want to acknowledge where I'm from, which is on coastal Miwok territory in California, and to really honor the coastal Miwok people, and to know that this is a time we should all be lifting up Indigenous leadership, especially Indigenous women's knowledge. And if you don't know the Indigenous people upon whose land you are on, I would really suggest that you find out and do everything you can to support that Indigenous leadership and their long-standing knowledge of living well and in harmony with the lands that we all live on, and caring for Mother Earth in a sacred way. So with that, I'm going to hand the floor over to Tara, and she very kindly is acknowledging that she's going first, and some of the elders are going after her. So that is my responsibilities, not Tara's. So, but I wanted to give the floor to Tara and let you go ahead and get started. Thank you, Tara, for joining us. Tara, I think you might be on mute.
Ooh, there we go. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Thank you for joining us. Hi.
Hi. Yeah, so I just want to make sure, like, the two other women that are actually, I think all of you are older than I am. Typically I would be going last. I would speak last. I'm not the most knowledgeable person in the room. So if anyone wants to go before me, please let me know. Now's the time. Anyone? Anyone? No? Okay. I just want to make sure. So Buju all, Jabawekwe Indigenous Makwan Dudem, Couchiching and Dunjaba. My name is Tara Houska. I'm Bear Clan from Couchiching First Nation, calling in from the Leech Lake Reservation in northern Minnesota. It's It's a very strange time to be indoors this many weeks. I'm typically outside, and so it's been very odd to be so showered and clean for all these weeks. But I'm really honored to be here, and I really appreciate Osprey pulling this together and pulling together these amazing Indigenous women from across Turtle Island. It's so good to see your faces and to just kind of be with each other for a little bit, even if we're far apart. I guess I would start by acknowledging that I really appreciate all these women coming together, not just the Indigenous women on this call, but all the people that are here sharing the space with us, wanting to hear our voices and listen. I think we're in this moment where it feels like we're all confined, but we're seeing so many different weaknesses in the existing societal fabric. We're seeing these breakdowns happen of really, really basic things, like basic services like food, like healthcare, like water. Our most at-risk populations experiencing this virus in a different way than everyone else, being disparately impacted and kind of reflecting the already disparate conditions that exist. I think it's been interesting to be on so many calls with so many folks and share space with them and be on Zoom call after Zoom call and connect with each other this way. But it's also, I think, a moment where we get a lot of time to reflect too, and to think about what's most important to us and to think about, what we hold most dear. And it seems to be for so many people that they're realizing, actually, my family is the most dear thing to me, not my job. My elders are so important to me. That I will do whatever I can to make sure that they are safe. I think I've seen a lot of people realizing I don't have an access to food if I don't have access to a grocery store. That I maybe should look into community gardening, or I should look into developing my relationship with the earth in a more substantive way. I think those are beautiful moments, and something that we have this time, all these weeks indoors to look at and think about, and also to think about the people who can't be indoors. There's lots and lots of people who are still in the streets. There's lots of people who are in homeless shelters that are in conditions where they're in intergenerational families, which is often the case in many Native communities, but also in many just poverty-stricken communities, that we are living multiple people in one place. My normal existence is living in an encampment about 200 yards off the proposed Line 3 route. So it's been, not a huge change, just in the sense of we've already were isolated and we already kind of were self-quarantined. But there's all this chaos happening past the trees, and we've, moved north a little bit just to do the sugar bush and collect sap from the trees and do that part of our spring harvest, and be able to move freely, because you can move freely on the reservation and not necessarily in the state. They put in stay-at-home orders. But we have this time, I think, to really step back and think about those things. And for those of us who are parents or have children, I've seen this kind of trajectory of watching family members who were super frustrated at first and had all these kids, and they're like, oh my goodness, like, I have so much more respect for teachers and stuff. But now, kind of like a little bit further along, it feels like they're kind of like looking at, it's kind of cool to have our kids at home, and it's kind of cool to see them learning these other skills and to see them connecting in a different way, and not being in a very structured classroom all the time, in a structured place all the time. Instead, they're with family, and that's really beautiful. But I know Osprey pulled us together here to also talk about our front lines and what's happening. It's been also very eye-opening, and maybe not so much for those of us who engage with these systems all the time, to see corporate control and fossil fuel destruction just totally using this virus as a cover to continue to do the dastardly work that they do. So here in Minnesota and in many other places along other proposed pipeline routes and in extraction points and all those different hurting places across Mother Earth, there are exceptions to stay-at-home orders that are specifically for fossil fuel infrastructure. So they can continue to do pre-construction. They can continue to bring in, influxes of workers. And in our case here in Minnesota, we're seeing them getting ready to bring in all of their work sites materials. So their matting materials are stacking up all over our state. They are preparing to cut down the forests and get ready to put their pipeline and bring their materials trench into the ground. Line 3 is a almost 1 million barrel per day tar sands line coming from Alberta that goes down through Saskatchewan, Manitoba, into the corner of North Dakota and through Minnesota. It passes through the Mississippi headwaters and terminates at Lake Superior. That's their plan, is to send this destructive project in the face of tar sands collapsing before our eyes. Like, that is happening also. Financially, these systems are really hurting. And I think we're seeing that, maybe it's actually not viable to continue to extract endlessly, and with particularly tar sands, it's been trading at less than $5 a barrel. Was like $3.83 the other day. I mean, that's insane to continue to invest in an industry that's clearly so over the line and has shown itself that it's not a financial future. And it's not an economic future, and it's certainly not a good future for all of us that drink water and breathe air. Line 3 is, near and dear to our hearts, simply just because of the threats to wild rice. Wild rice is at the heart of who Anishinaabe people are. This passes through dozens of wild rice beds and watersheds and could irrevocably harm that part of our culture and that part of our understanding and relationship to the world. It's a moment where I hope the climate movement and all of us that are looking at how do we get involved, what do we do, that we see just how important it is to center land and to center people in our conversations and in our thoughts and in our actions, most of all. That depending on a handful of front lines across the globe in these beautiful places and spaces is not viable. That is not how a movement is successful. That these groups of largely Indigenous peoples or local peoples who are impacted cannot carry this weight on our own, and we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be alone in these fights. And I hope that this is a moment where we look at that and we really think about it. There's some different things that are coming up over the next few weeks. I know there's something pretty large that has a large coalition of us for Earth Day. So April 22nd, April 23rd. I'm part of a group called Stop the Money Pipeline Coalition. There's going to be a large segment of that that's dedicated to different frontlines Indigenous land defenders, ways to get involved, what's happening across the globe, and pulling your money out of the banks that are financing these projects, because that is something they definitely listen to. The move that just happened this last week was that the fossil fuel companies are actually in really, really dire straits. And some of the banks, instead of pulling out of those companies, have decided they're going to run them themselves. So the banks are directly going to run the companies, like some of these fracked oil companies. That should tell us where we're at when it comes to looking at these corporate actors to do the right thing. We need a lot more than that, and we need actual change. Not just through electoral politics, but I think through empowering ourselves and each other. So that's all I have for you. Miigwech.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tara, for your powerful words and updating what's happening in your community. And if there's any links you want to put into the chat for the Giniw Collective, I'm also really encouraging all of our wonderful speakers to go ahead and share their organizations. We hope you will, donate to them generously if you can, because all of these women really need our support to do that frontline work. And I'm going to bring on the next speaker in a moment, but I just wanted to say, WECAN's also part of the Stop the Money Pipeline campaign, and we've also been writing letters to the government and, collectively doing a lot of different things, because it is completely outrageous when the fossil fuel industry should be on a managed decline. They're a dying industry. This is not the time that banks should be, as Tara said, buying into the fossil fuel industry. This is the moment where we all need to push and say, Let's have clean, renewable energy. This is the time. The market is in this correct direction, and the earth is telling us we need to stop this climate chaos. And so for all of these reasons, and in respect for Indigenous rights, Indigenous territories, we really need to continue to keep up this divestment work and also keep the government moving in the right direction and the banks heading in the right direction. So thanks for bringing that up and all of your good words. I got a message that Faith might need to jump on to another call. So pardon me, Freda, I'm going to switch the order and bring Faith Spotted Eagle on to talk to us. So thanks so much. If you could jump on, Faith, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much for your time.
Greetings. How do I get on?
You're on. We hear you, and you look beautiful, and we see you.
Okay, awesome. So I see you, but I don't see myself. So I'm selfish. You assure me I'm on, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
You are the main thing we see, and we hear you beautifully.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone that is on, and for allowing me to share this space with you during this strange, wonderful time. The strangeness, we all know the wonderful time is we're in our own altars, our own homes, doing the things that we did a long time ago when we were young, when we stayed at home and were able to do that. So there is a measure of thankfulness there. I greet you from Ihangtoa Oyate. Michaje Faith Spotted Eagle, Tokan Inajin, Hem Mieksto. My Dakota name is Standing Stone, and I will share quickly some of the things that I would like to let other people know in case they want to join us, encourage, send prayers, and we will do likewise. But we've been fighting Keystone Pipeline for 12 years now. Previous to that, I was born into the water fight when my home was taken on the Missouri River when I was 1.5 years. So that's all I remember as part of my life in fighting the assault on water. So what I want to do is to go over some of the things that we've done. And it's not just us, it's everybody doing this in concert with each other. And so as all of you speak, we're going to be talking about some of the same movements. But one of the things that has evolved out of our fight up here in the Oceti Shakoi is an amazing cooperative effort of the grassroots, the treaty people, the elected officials, and the ranchers and farmers, and that has not happened ever. And so beginning 12 years ago, we signed an international treaty to protect the sacred against the tar sands, KXL, and other threats. So since then, we have been unlearning a lot of oppressive ways towards each other and acceptance of each other, particularly with our ranchers and our farmers, because it's always been a fight over the land. And so it's been some we have not been able to surmount, but it's very encouraging where we've come so far in all the actions that we've taken. I want to share that we did get this message from some of the elders in a dream that came about 6 months ago. And the message that came was from one of our prophets that people needed to go home and pray in their homes. And when I was asked to talk to this 6 months ago, I never dreamed that this would be this, but we've been praying since then because we didn't know what was coming. But we were told to tell people to set up their altars, to set up their ceremonial items, and to gather their families together, because a lot of the things that were destructing us were in our homes, and that we needed to return to those because those are our individual altars and pray as hard as we can. And now we're forced to. I would never have dreamed that that's what was going to be coming out of that dream, but the dream is extending, and I'll share more as the months go along. So we're right where we need to be at our individual altars. And I send my prayers because prayer is the most powerful spiritual resistance that I have ever experienced. Miracles occur over and over again. And sometimes we have to be quiet to notice those miracles. For example, what recently happened with Dapple, we knew in our ceremonies that eventually that answer was going to come, but it didn't come when we thought it needed to. It took a couple years, 3 years for it to come. So some of these prayers and these actions that we're taking, we're not going to be able to see it in our physical life, but I hope to be reincarnated to be able to come back, and I know I will, to be able to see the result of it, maybe 50 years, 100 years, however long Creator deems that is necessary for me to learn more and to be able to earn that right to come back. So it's all good. In our Braveheart Society, which is a traditional revived women's society, and we also have men, we have some sub-societies. We were told that our role was to retrieve the dead from the battlefield. And we're doing that in an emotional way because a lot of our people have suffered emotional death because of all the oppression. So when we call their spirit home, they can't do the things that we want them to do or even what they want to do until their spirit can come back to them. And so that's what happens in some of these movements. They remember who they are. And so there's a role for everybody, but sometimes we have to pave the way. And I think that's what the wonderful people that are on this call are about. One, 2 or 3 things that we've done that I like to share and ask prayers for is that we decided once we came home from Standing Rock, we learned a lot, and we decided that we needed to do what we needed to do in our home territory that couldn't happen at Standing Rock. So immediately upon coming home, we set our goal to create co-management of a cultural bioregion on the Missouri River. Immediately on a 150-mile stretch of the Missouri River, we are doing surveys, we're mapping, we're GPSing everything, using ArcGIS, so we will know what everything is on that 150-mile stretch. And in 10 years, we hope to co-manage that part of the Missouri River with my tribe, Houska, and all the other feds or whoever else is on that line. Because truly co-management and eventually full management is the only way we're going to regain control of these areas. Consultation is an absolute failure. It's only it's a fake act that the feds put there for us to keep us busy. It's literally a waste of time. Unless it goes into court. And so what we've done for the last 3 years, we have created what we call water talks and stakeholders, and we are creating a plan to manage the Missouri River watershed. And that way we're doing this before, in a proactive way, before these industries come in, and we can keep out those who are coming in to do destruction to the hydroscape and the landscape. And so out of that, what we did is we did a MMIW study, which was released in December, and we did that in cooperation with Sovereign Bodies Institute. And we gathered data of the MMIW existence in a 4-state area of the Oceti Chipewyan. So having done that, we went on and did a police study of the impact that our inability to not have the operational management to handle 5,000 men coming into our territory. So we did a police study and we have published that. And those 2 studies have set the groundwork for us to do what we call data sovereignty. If you're going to be a good hunter, and if you go into a creek and there's no deer, and you take your weapon and you think, where are those deer? The deer left a long time ago. But you don't know that unless you've surveyed the area. And so what we're doing is we're gathering numbers, data management, so we can incorporate that sovereignty on numbers and actual knowledge of what exists in those areas. And that's in regard to plants, water, the quality of the water. We hope to set our own standards for water quality management and truly manage and return to the scientists that we were 100 years ago, 200 years ago. We were the first scientists that knew everything that were on these rivers and these watersheds. And we still have some elders who are still alive that remember those ways of management. And so that's what, and we're teaching, while we're relearning all of this, we have a number of young people who are learning at the same time, because some of this we forgot. The other part I think that we've forgotten is that back in the old days when we had our camps, which was not too long ago, we knew how to organize. We've forgotten some tools of organizing because of colonization, and colonization taught us to operate in isolation and competition. And so by learning basic Indigenous organizing tools, we can heal, build trust, and not be afraid of each other. Because I see a lot of fear sometimes when we go into these movements. And so that's what we're doing, is we're cooperating with the Organizing Alliance to do relearning, unlearning unhealthy ways of organizing. And we don't have to compete with each other is the most powerful thing. I think a lot of these old ways are still there. And every time, because I am a speaker of the language, and that is not said as an oppressive statement, because I'm willing to teach and share, but each of the languages has a code. And so if you say a certain word, it has a whole line of behavior that goes along with that word. So what we're doing in our bioregion work is we're going back to the words of our language and we're translating them into secrets that are still there. It's kind of like the Da Vinci Code. There were a lot of secrets in our language that were left for us, but when we forgot that, or it was beat out of us, we couldn't go back to that encyclopedia of knowledge that is in the language. And so I encourage each one of you, even if it's only introducing yourself, there's 100 times things more that you're saying when you introduce yourself. So that's the type of decoding that we're doing in the bioregion work. As far as the Keystone Pipeline, a very important date is coming up on April 16th. Rosebud and Fort Belknap, our relatives are going into a court in Montana. I believe it's in Great Falls, and they're asking for a TRO, the temporary restraining order. They've added on the COVID threat, and of course, TC Energy is saying that is not allowable because they never entered it before. And that is so ridiculous because COVID wasn't here before the last time around, but they're silly. But anyway, pray as hard as you can for a good outcome. Whatever comes is going to come. Creator knows that. But the 16th is a key day. And here in South Dakota, we are under this, the influence of this mad woman who is the governor. And she refuses to give shelter in place. And the reason she's doing that is we well know that she wants the Keystone Pipeline built as much as it can be built, because at DAPL, that same thing happened where the judge said a lot of it had already been constructed and he couldn't stop it. So she's trying to get the Keystone Pipeline. And I know that Trump met with some oil heads a couple weeks ago. This is part of a grand plan. And you can see the governors in Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, they're holding out so they can get this oil in place. The second reason in South Dakota that they're holding out is the tourism. I have had word from my friends in Western South Dakota, in the Oceti Chakowin, that there are hundreds of people coming into the Black Hills with license plates from all over the place. So they're running to the Black Hills with the shelter not in place. We've got an outpouring of people who are coming to our territory, which are going to make it unsafe for us. But the beginning of the tourist season is April 1st. So she's wanting to pack those campgrounds. She's wanting to get those RV places in place so she can satisfy the economic part of the income for the state. And the other thing that is really interesting is that the majority of the legislators that we have in South Dakota are elderly. We had a legislator die about a month ago when they were in session. He got infected and he died. But they are really at risk, and I think we're at risk in more ways than one because they have a difficult time expressing themselves when you listen to them. And I think it's because of their advanced age. I really think that they're probably suffering some deficits. And it's hard for me to say that because I'm an elder, but I know that our elders are much more honored in our culture, and we retain probably a lot more than they do in their culture because they're not honored as we are. And I'm really thankful for the younger activists that are online because this is truly an intergenerational fight. Some of the things that we learned, we are still available to teach you. Some of the things that you are learning, you can help us unlearn some things that might be barriers to our thinking, because sometimes when we know so much, that gets too much. And I think I'd like to leave with all of you with a thought that I got from one of my spiritual sisters, my Huska sister, Rosalie Little Thunder, who led the fight to save the buffalo in Yellowstone. I asked her one time, I said, Mashke, people always say, what is an elder? What could you tell me an elder is? She thought about it for a while and she said, you know what? I think being an elder is when you get good to listen to. And that is just perfect. If people are not listening to you and walking away, you probably are not there yet. And so that's what I keep in mind, is that I got to be good to listen to it. And I have thousands of stories, but some of them most of them are related to the land. So the messages are in the land. And I am so excited about our bioregion work, because we're just creating a template that we want to share with other Indigenous people. And hopefully this template we're developing on this cultural bioregion, which is called the WECAN, the sacred water bottle, could go all the way up the Missouri River up into the headwaters and the Mississippi River. So I look forward to connecting and connect with us on our next water talk. And it'll probably be on Zoom, but we'll still have the water talk. And our goal is probably 150 years into the future with this bioregion. And so I'm doing it for my grandchildren, your grandchildren. So I have a call coming up shortly, but it's what I can share today. And let me rack my old brain here to see if I need to put anything else in there. I think water testing. Water testing is something that we need to raise above EPA. Many tribes, when you ask them about their water, they'll say, oh, we have EPA. That is a colonial construct, because when you have EPA, that information does not belong to us. That is federal government derived. And so the EPA has a ceiling, a limited amount of water quality. They have 128 contaminants that they can oversee. But there are something like 250 contaminants that are coming into our water. And so we really put our hands up to the Isleta people in the Southwest, who were able to develop water quality standards where they were actually able to take over the management of water. And that's what we need to do. So while we're out protesting, while we're out carrying signs, somewhere in the background, we've got to do this hardcore back to the land recognition of what those management secrets are about, and reinstill them into all the water surrounding us, because the water is the first medicine. We're all born into it in the womb, but we can't just sit and pray with it, because my granddaughter went down and prayed with the water at one of our water talks. And when I said, had everybody go to the shore and pray, and she came back and she was crying. And I said, Takoja, what's wrong? And she said, Grandma, she said, Kunshi, I asked the river to help us. And the river said, I can't help you anymore. You have to help me. And I think that's the message that the waters and the land is giving us now. And so go back to your altars, your living room, your place of prayer, and it has to be close to home now, but that's what the spirits told us to do, and we didn't listen, so now we're forced to do it. So I thank all of you. My prayers and spirit are with you, and I'll look forward to getting yours. Wopita. I'll stay on as long as I can, but when that call comes, I have to get off. So I don't know if you have any questions, but if they come later, I'll hop on about 4:30 after my call. So thank you for letting me go for second. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Faith. I'm actually trying to recover from crying from your talk, so just give me a minute here, everybody. Whoa, the waters are coming. Thank you so much, Faith Spotted for your words of wisdom and brilliance and strategy and courage. I don't know if you have your chat section open in all this technology land, but people are giving you enormous appreciation, love, and thank you very, very much for that beautiful talk you just gave us. Yeah, lots of people are just sharing appreciation for you. And because you might need to jump off, I'm just gonna ask a few quick things, and then we'll move to you, Freda, because there'll be more time for Q&A for all the speakers at the end. But since we might lose you for a moment, just a couple of quick things. You had mentioned the temporary restraining order on April 16th. It would be great to know if there's anything people could write a letter, do any support. So that's coming up real soon, like real tangible thing to support that frontline work. So that would be one thing. And for folks to know, we will be compiling resources after this call that we'll share publicly, because lots of folks are wanting to know about the bioregional water work you're talking about, like they're really interested in that. If there's a link to that, we could share that, get support from you there. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'm going to hand it back to you, Faith, to learn more about the temporary restraining order on April 16th, if there's a direct thing people can do. Some folks may not know that MMIW is missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is a huge problem when these pipelines go in, where man camps occur, and I'm sure other speakers will talk about it, but just to catch people up. And they bring, terrible harm to the women in the communities through rape and violence, and also now with COVID-19 disease. And we must not allow these man camps to happen. But let me just go back to you, Faith, for a second and ask about April 16th and this temporary restraining order, if there's anything we can do.
Yes, I think probably the best thing is to go to Promise to Protect, which is we affiliated with Promise to Protect. It was a petition of 25,000 signatures of people who promised, if necessary, to come to South Dakota. But of course, that's another challenge. But they did protect against the Keystone pipeline, and they were able to fund us to buy a Mother Earth tiny house for MMIWG protection. And so we were all set to do a tour in March. We were going to go to 5 communities, and we were going to do education because we are under threat in South Dakota because of the riot boosting laws, where they said we can't assemble. So we were going to do an educational tour with this tiny house, but out of respect for all the resolutions of the tribes that shut their borders, we canceled it. But the state of South Dakota did not respect it, and the man camps are still going. So as far as finding out about it, if you go to Promise to Protect, and you can Google that, you'll see, and then also go to Bold, Nebraska. They are one of our affiliates with the farmers and ranchers. We revived the Cowboy Indian Alliance when we signed the international, and they have some of the petitions on there. So send a prayer on April 16th. You could also call the Rosebud Sioux tribe. They have their own numbers, but just Google Bold, Nebraska, and they have some of the information. And 350.org also has some information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faith. And we'll also follow up with some other resources to support the incredible management plan that you talked about, and that much deeper long-term analysis about, Indigenous people having their land back and managing it, that long-term strategy. So we'll make sure to loop that back in again and again. Just so many prayers and thanks to you. And we'll come back to you, Faith. Thank you. And I'd like to hand the floor over to Chief Howihkat, Freda Huson. Please go ahead, Freda. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon.
We see you and we hear you. Thank you.
It's great to be here. Where to start? Well, ever since January, we have been dealing with legal things, talking to lawyers, and then when COVID hit, everybody else was required to be put into isolation, and yet CGL is still going full swing. They say they cut back their workers, yet the motels are still full in Houston. There's 3 motels there, and then 1 in Smithers and 1 in Burns Lake, and they seem to have speed tracked instead of slowed down. And when we questioned them on how come they're not practicing social distancing, because there's 3 people per vehicles or 2 people riding in a vehicle, they come from motels onto our territories, and then they go back to the motels, and then they switch shifts and they go back to their home communities, to their families, then they come back again. So you can see how much risk they're putting our small communities at with this COVID-19, that even though we're being very cautious and staying home and being isolated, they aren't being isolated and they're still working. And even the police, they call them the SURG unit that actually escorts the CGL to the work sites. They actually have 3 officers per vehicle. So that's not practicing social distancing either. So I'm really concerned because our communities are very small and our hospitals are small here, that they're putting our small communities at risk. They don't realize how serious this virus is. People think you see all kinds of stuff on Facebook saying it's a hoax, or else you hear that it's real or it's not. But that's the dangers of it, that people are minimizing it, yet it's serious. And what I've gotten over the last while, the thing that helped us through when the arrests happened on my territory was we did ceremony and prayers. And to me, I really believe it was the prayers that helped us through this whole ordeal. As you'd seen how violent the police forces were when they took the other 2 camps down. And when they came to us, that few days before they even reached us, we were doing prayers, and I did prayers on the bridge that the enemy, when they crossed those lines, that peace was going to overhit them and they would not even be able to behave in aggression the way they planned to. And when they did come, the RCMP were peaceful. They weren't able to be aggressive with us. They had to remain peaceful the whole time. And we were treated with respect. Even in the jails, they were running around trying to meet all our needs. And that just goes to show the power of prayer. And to me, through all of this, with what COVID is happening, it's a warning to everybody that our ancestors, long before anybody came to our lands, they did everything in prayer. They prayed about everything and they prayed for everything. And what I've been shown is we forgot how to do that. We're so caught up in our day-to-day lives, trying to survive, trying to work, trying to make an income, trying to put a roof over our heads, that we put that last. We go to it only when we're in trouble. And I was shown that all of this is happening and we're all in isolation, teaching us how to pray again, teaching us that we need to rely on a higher power than ourselves. And right now, the root of all evil, of all of it, is money. These corporations don't have, like, what they have should be enough, but it's not enough for them. They want more, more, more. And that is what's destroying the planet, and that's what's destroying everything. And they set up a system of corruption that has become very corrupt. And they try to cover up everything they're doing that they did wrong. And even though they know it's wrong, they're still trying to push forward. As the other speaker said, that there's no money to be made in this LNG and the frack gas. It's what, at 3 cents, and they need 11 cents to make a profit. So it makes you wonder, why are they still pushing it, even though it's not going to make any money for them? And to me, I think they're just trying to save face because they messed up, and they don't want to admit that they have to shut the project down because it's not going to make any money for them. And for us, it's always been about the water. And that's what we're really fighting for, is our water. The water that flows by my cabin and by our healing center is clean water that we can drink right from the river, and we don't have to treat it. We don't have to do anything to it. We could take a cup and drink it right from the river. It's one of the only rivers that are still clean. So that's what we've been fighting for, is the water. That's where our salmon come from. The water supplies everything. It grows your food. It gives water to us to survive. We need the water to survive. And at first I felt like we were being defeated when I see them keep going. But no, we're not going to be defeated, because there's only so much you can put on Mother Earth before she starts fighting back. And when she fights back, you can't stop her. You cannot stop the fires. You can't stop the water flows when they start flooding. All of that, Mother Nature has so shown her power over and over. We see it in the news all the time. And sometimes that's what it takes to wake us up. Where a lot of people are still sleeping. They're not awake, and it's times like this that is going to wake, because they're forced to wake up. Some people can't even get access to food. Some people don't have free access to water. And we have our people that are on the streets that don't even have a roof over their head to protect them from this virus. So it always takes, to me, it always takes hardship, I find, put on our people for us to wake up. So I have a strong faith, and I believe that if people get back to prayer, pray for the water, pray for the planet, pray for each other, that we realize that if we don't have that in the forefront, we all lose. And I was just watching a documentary on how serious this virus was. And people aren't taking it serious, that if they don't contain it, they said with even just 0.2%, 2 in 1,000 people will die, or else if 0.8, 80 in 100 people will die. So people aren't taking that virus serious and are thinking they can just go about and talk with people and not keeping the social distance, because sometimes you don't even show symptoms and then you can pass it around. And that's what the science has been showing, that some people don't show the symptoms and you could be passing it around. And the ones that are most vulnerable are our elders, and they're our knowledge keepers. We should be protecting our elders and do our best to follow the rules. As hard as it is, you got nothing to do, pray. Prayer is what's going to help us. And that's what's got me through these last 10 years of protecting our land and protecting our waters, prayers. If I didn't have prayer in my life, I probably wouldn't even last these 10 years trying to protect our lands, protect our waters. Just like that said that young person was, we have to do the protecting now. Otherwise, Mother Earth will fight back, and all of us will have to pay.
Thank you so much, Freda, for your powerful comments and the incredible leadership that you have shown, and courage, and the fight that you are having. We are standing with you in solidarity. We are putting links to the work that you've done into the chat, and I'm sure people have questions for you, and we'll come back to you after we hear from our last speaker. But thank you so much for how much we have been looking to you and the power of your people and your protection of your lands at this time. And we stand with you. So I'm going to hand the floor over to Eriel Deranger, but I just wanted to also make one quick mention that, you know, it's just so frustrating, this link between the fossil fuel industry, our governments, and the banks. And that's what many of us are doing to fight these systems and this horrible economy that is bent on endless economic growth and exploitation of the land and exploitation of people and exploitation of women, and especially people of color and Indigenous people. These economies are based on that colonized worldview, and it has to change. And it's really appalling when right now, fossil fuels are being called essential infrastructure, when we know that right now, because of this time when everyone is staying in shelter, people are not flying, they're actually running out of room of where to store the gas and oil. They actually don't know where to even put it, and that they're shoving these pipelines through and continuing this horrifically unjust activity is even more crazy, because there's a glut right now. They don't even need this oil. They don't even need this gas. So we really need to keep mobilizing and following the leadership of our Indigenous women here in these fights, because this is just showing us the total corruption of the system. And with that, I welcome you, Eriel Deranger. Please join us, and we look forward to your comments. Thank you, Eriel.
Thank you. Iklanete, Denesotlaneta, Eriel Tchekwie, Hushe, Deranger, Betsy, and Nihesli. My name is Eriel Tchekwie Deranger, and I'm a member of the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation, which is located in the Treaty 8 territory in what is so-called Alberta. In my community is downstream from the largest industrial project on planet Earth, which is the Alberta tar sands. And each one of the speakers today talked about energy infrastructure, as well as tar sands pipelines. I know, like, Freda is actually everyone on this call is a longtime ally of mine. But I do have to say, like, even the Coastal GasLink, which is a natural gas pipeline, has direct correlations to the infrastructure of the project, so the expansion of the Alberta tar sands. And right now, one of the biggest consumers of natural gas in my province is actually the Alberta tar sands. It uses enough natural gas every day to heat the equivalent of 3 million homes. And so they have a vested interest in projects like the Coastal GasLink moving forward to have a secure in-country source of natural gas to continue to power these projects. And so when we talk about like the connections and interconnections that we have, that systems of predatory capitalism have forced on our communities, we're not just, theoretically all in the same fight or all in the same canoe, but we are actually all in the same fight. We are all fighting the same systems that have oppressed our people for hundreds and hundreds of years since colonization. And these forms of extractivism and predatory capitalism have been imposed in our communities, and they continue to utilize tactics that divide and conquer, not just our communities, not just our lands and territories, but our minds and our mindset. And the statement that you talked about earlier with like the banks and the investments, I'm seeing that here right in my own province and territory in Canada, north of the medicine line, so-called Canada, north of the medicine line. Freda talked about the price of natural gas being super low. Well, the price of oil is at an all-time low. They've never seen a price so low. And it's not viable. It's not economically viable to extract tar sands anymore. And yet we are still seeing not just the efforts of the financial sector, but the efforts of our governments, the colonial governments of the day, still trying to have those clutches and those last bits of this dying industry. So much so that in Alberta, in the midst of a global pandemic, where people are fighting to have resources to buy food, to keep a roof over their heads, to keep their heads above the poverty line. We're seeing the community rise up and support each other. We're seeing Indigenous communities calling on their hunters, fishers, and trappers to go out and harvest to feed those that don't have the resources to go to the grocery store, or that are vulnerable and can't go to the grocery store. And yet our colonial governments are not doing anything to care for our people. Just a week and a half ago, the Alberta government announced that they were going to lay off over 20,000 people in the education sector so that they could save $128 million to help with the offset the costs of dealing with the pandemic. 3 days later, they announced that they were going to invest 1.1 directly into the Keystone XL pipeline and offer an additional $6.4 billion as a loan for the company so that they could build the pipeline so they could get Alberta's oil to market. In the midst of a pandemic, we are talking about lending billions of dollars at the expense of educators, at the expense of our people. And not just our people, like our people's being able to feed themselves, but my people in my community have seen firsthand what this type of extractive industry does, not just to our lands and territories, but to the spiritual and emotional well-being of our communities. We have seen how capitalism has divided us. We have seen how in this moment of a global pandemic, none of that matters anymore to our communities. I have seen the tremendous turnaround and shift of our community showing up for each other and making sure our elders have food, making sure that our single mothers are taken care of, making sure that our people are taken care of outside of the spectrum of empire, outside of the spectrum of colonization. We are seeing more young people learning their languages. We are seeing more young people reaching out to their elders to hear the stories and prophecies of this time that we are currently in. For many, many years, we talked about climate change. We talked about the prophecies of climate change. And a lot of our elders didn't understand this term climate change. They talked about a great change that was about to come to the earth. And I think that this pandemic is one of those things. And one of the most interesting relations that I've heard is that there are international biologists and ecologists and even experts like Vandana Shiva that have said that the destabilization of our ecosystems, our biosphere on this planet, the destabilization of our interrelationship, our species interrelationship with the natural world has led to a point that these viruses continue to breed and jump genomes. We have destabilized everything so much that we're now seeing viruses once only seen in animals jumping genomes and affecting the human species. And that is our own doing. And this is a part of Mother Earth fighting back. So while we're seeing Coastal GasLink continue to ramp up and push forward their natural gas pipeline through the territories of the interior, or so-called British Columbia, and through the territories of many Indigenous communities, the pipelines like the Line 3, the Keystone XL, the Dakota Access Pipeline. In Canada, we also have the Trans Mountain Tar Sands Pipeline. We have pipelines everywhere. But those pipelines, like Osprey stated, have nowhere to go. They don't have markets to go to, and this system is dying right before our eyes. And we have a huge, an amazing opportunity, like Faith stated, to really reimagine what our future is. So while this time is terrifying and scary, it is a time of cleansing. It is a time of us to reimagine what our futures look like for future generations. We are seeing the reimagination of what our cultures, what our ceremonies, what our languages mean in rebuilding our communities in this post-pandemic, post-climate changed world. And we have the ability to lean on knowledge systems that are far beyond the spectrum of Western ideologies and imperial data and science. We have the ability to reconnect with our spirituality and our cosmology that allows us to understand those things. And I'm going to end with this one little story, because there's a lot of people talking about what kind of traditional medicines and things we can use to help our communities stay healthy or strong or even cure COVID at this time. But I grew up very, very traditional and very, very in a lot of ceremonies and a lot of spiritual teachings. And I remember when I was younger, during the 80s, when we saw the pandemic, the global pandemic of HIV emerge, there was a young man that came to a spiritual leader in the community that I grew up in, and he said, "I'm here, I have HIV and I need a cure." And the elder, we all sat in ceremony, and the elder stopped after singing and praying, and he said to him, "I don't know this virus. This virus has never been here before. And I can't give you a cure because I don't know what it is. And I need to speak to your illness. I need to understand what it is. And then I need to go back to the medicines, and I need to speak to the medicines to find out what it is that I can do to help you. And so I need you to keep coming back here and coming to ceremony." And so we have to understand that there are no quick answers to all of this, that it requires us to understand what we have done. What has brought this virus here? How do we understand how it relates to ourselves, how it relates to the natural world? And what do those medicines in the natural world have to tell us back, as long as we are willing to listen? And those are the connections that have been broken through systems of predatory capitalism. Those are the systems that have continued to try to be broken by companies like the Coastal GasLink, by projects like the Keystone XL, by projects like Line 3, by these places that are trying to say you want money and jobs over your connections to the natural world. And so while we're seeing those systems fall, one of the things I have faith in, like Faith talked about, is I have faith in our people. I have faith in our knowledge and understanding, and I have faith in the fact that Mother Earth knows best. And that these systems, while they're trying their hardest, I know that we have the Fredas and the Taras and the Faiths and my cousins and sisters and brothers in my territory that continue to hold the line. And we continue not just to hold the line to fight, but we continue to hold the line of proposing what needs to replace those broken systems that have got us to where we are today. So, I just want to say, like, with the big banks, that stuff, if you're looking for a way to engage, do that. Anywhere that you are, We're seeing, you know, biggest banks in the United States talking about buying out these dying fossil fuel companies to hold them up. It goes against their principles that they've signed on to in the financial principles, particularly the equator principles, the precautionary principles, the sustainability principles that tell these big banks that they can't invest in projects that violate human rights, violate environmental standards, and particularly don't violate the rights of Indigenous peoples. That work was done by myself, Tara Houska, Michelle Cook, all these amazing Indigenous leaders that have done all this work in the financial sector to ensure those rights are protected. And now we're seeing banks just do a 160 to try to save the last clutches of capitalism. The root causes of COVID, the root causes of where we are today is because of predatory capitalism, because of systems of hyper individuality, the accumulation of wealth, notoriety, and fame that are a disease. And there's a really great book, and I plug it all the time. If you're looking for this, there's a really great book that was written in the 70s by a man named Jack Forbes. He passed away, but it was called Columbus and Other Cannibals. And he equates the disease of colonization and systems of patriarchy, colonial or capitalism, hyper-individuality as a disease of the mind and the soul, a disease from an Anishinaabe teaching of the Wetiko. And the Wetiko wanted to eat all the animals and eat the man to absorb all their power because he was consumed with greed. And that even systems of colonization where we go out and we try to like colonize new lands and take them for ourselves, we are not just consuming the land, we are consuming the people and the animals, and we're doing that to consume all of the power that they hold. And so when we're talking about trying to break these cycles, we need to be talking about breaking that mindset, that Wetiko disease, and how we can undo that. That is part of decolonization. It's not just knowing where you are and being able to say, I'm on the Pomo territory or I'm in the Dene territory. It's about actively undoing those processes and releasing the clutches of the Wetiko mentality, about looking at how you can not only understand who your neighbors are, but how you can understand the interconnections and your relationships, not just with those other humans, but with those trees, those medicines, those waterways, those animals, the earth, the water, the sky, grandfather sun, grandmother moon. These are all of the things that we have to understand and re-establish those connections with in order to win these fights. And that is why I believe that we will win. Because I've been out to Wet'suwet'en. I have been down south. I have seen these people, my brothers and sisters, on those front lines, and I know where their strength comes from. It doesn't come from the mighty dollar bill. It doesn't come from power. It comes from their relationships with the land. Masicho, hi.
Ooh, thank you. Thank you so much, Eriel. Beautifully articulated, powerful words. Thank you so much. And also just want to acknowledge sending love to you and your family at this time too. And thank you for your powerful words. And I'd love for folks to go ahead and put questions in the chat, and we'll be looking for those. And welcoming all the speakers, I'll be reading out some of the questions and opening up the floor for the speakers to respond. Lots of love and thank yous are coming to all the speakers and to you, Eriel, right now specifically. Thank you for your powerful words. And I just wanted to, while people are taking a moment to catch their breath and writing into the chat some of their questions, I'd actually been doing some research on following scientists who are trying to find out the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic and where this virus came from. And as Eriel said, to echo that a little bit more, you know, they don't know exactly where, they don't know which animal that crossover happened genetically with. But just to also echo that, because humans, and especially I would like to say the dominator culture, not everyone, dominator culture has, acquired this capitalistic frame of mind and this worldview and this take, and not reciprocity with the land, we have infiltrated so much of the wild. We have crossed our boundaries to the nth degree with wild nature, and that's where those crossovers happen. If we were not infiltrating the animal and plant world as we were, those crossovers don't happen, but we have gone too far. And this is where, we see the climate crisis and COVID-19 being completely linked up in that we have a detrimental relationship with the natural world, with Mother Earth. And this is Mother Earth speaking and loud and clear as she can, saying, no, you do not have dominion over nature. You are guests, you are visitors here on this beautiful planet. And so that crossover happens in that way. And to link that back into also our Indigenous sisters and brothers, 80% of the biodiversity that's left on the earth right now is in the lands and hands of Indigenous peoples. And so for everyone to know, one of the reasons I know we are so dedicated to Indigenous rights is that first and foremost, Indigenous people have the right to live in their traditional ways on their own lands. Full stop right there. But also we need to understand that Indigenous people are protecting the last of these wild places because of all of your incredible understanding of living in harmony with the land and listening to the forests and the trees and the animals and the moon and the sun and staying connected to Mother Earth. And so it's all of our duty to stand up for the Indigenous rights and to protect Indigenous rights, because a lot of those frontline fights are happening for all of us. So I just wanted to bring attention to that and to echo that, this crossover is happening because of destroying habitat. And I was really honored to have a conversation with a colleague working with Indigenous sisters in Guatemala. And they, speaking of dreams, one of the women had a dream in February. And her dream was that the plant world had come to her, the plant grandparents, and said, you are going to need us right now. You are going to need to really listen to us. And you need to start growing more food and growing more medicines. And she told that to her community. And all the women just started planting this February, all kinds of plant medicines and growing more food and listening and saying, we have to listen to the plant and animal people now. So just, to share more of these dreams that are happening right now and other ways of knowing, other ways of listening, and that we really do need to move out of these systems of what's important and what's not important, and moving away from this economic structure that is so deadly to all of us and to our Mother Earth. So I'm looking for some questions. Maybe you could help me.
Can I just make a statement while you're looking for questions? I just wanted to say, on that note of looking at different ways in which people are looking at COVID, Indigenous Climate Action. So I'm the executive director of Indigenous Climate Action, where we've been hosting a weekly webinar series for Indigenous rights and COVID. And so you can check us out on Facebook as well. We also have some resources on our blog, on our website that we try to update regularly. And I do also want to give a huge shout out and just talk about, I just want to make one reference to South America real quick. Some of the cases in Peru where we're now seeing COVID in the communities, it came from a trip where they went to try to raise the concerns against an oil and gas company in Europe. And when they came back, they brought COVID into their community. And so we're seeing how how even our fights to go on the front line to protect our communities, we're putting our communities at risk. It isn't just a simple thing of going there and speaking and trying to fight these things. These things come and they come. That disease and that mentality is literally becoming a real thing in the world. And it's such a scary thing. And so our communities are the most marginalized and the most impacted by these, not just by viruses, but by these systems of oppression.
Thank you. Thank you so much. There's a question about, could the speakers speak more to the importance of womanhood, femininity, women leaders, Mother Earth in this fight? Could you speak to this question about matriarchs and our connection as women to these fights and to our connection to the land? And maybe we'll just start with you, Tara and Freda, and then go to you, Eriel. I don't see Faith on the line right now, so I was not trying to leave her out. I think that she had to go. But maybe we could hand the floor back to you, Tara, and then go to you, Freda, and then you, Eriel, on this question of matriarchs. Tara?
Well, There's a lot of women on this call, I see. It looks like plenty of women. I think that we've seen what a westernized society run by patriarchs looks like, right? Like that's where we're at. Like that is honestly where we're at. We're at a place where we're seeing what a entire societal structure that's based on dominion and utilitarianism, and the land belongs to us and we have to use it and we have to abuse it and we take from it. It's something that we take from to exist. It's something that we leave our mark in, right? Like that's kind of like the mentality that's gotten us to this place. You know, I think inherently as women, as human beings that can create life, that have this inherent connection to life, that we're seeing this moment. And for us, actually, I was told by several of my teachers that this time was prophesized, that women stepping into leadership was prophesized, and that we are coming back into that balance, because it's always about balance, right? And we're really, really out of balance right now. The whole entire fabric is so out of balance that, you know, all these women are not just doing the work. We're stepping into like this leadership position of like, here's what needs to happen. You know, here's the difficult steps that you need to do. And here's the uncomfortable positions that we have to take, because we're talking about life. We're not talking about fame and attention and, you know, money, as Eriel referenced. Like that is so important to understand when we're looking at why are we doing these things. We are doing this to protect life. We are taking these stands because we want to save life. We inherently understand those connections to those that came behind us and those that come in front. We are just a link in a chain, and we have to continue that chain. And that's our duty as human beings, is to be those caretakers. So I think the matriarchy and the stepping of women into the forefront is because we are in this moment of deciding what we're going to do, if we're going to have life or not. I hate it when I hear that we're killing the planet. We are not killing the planet. We are killing ourselves. We are killing life. The planet will be fine. We've been wiped out before when we've been out of balance, and we are deeply out of balance. So we're at a moment where we can do something. You know, we have had the opportunity, but we haven't been doing it. But here we are, right? Like where our voices are powerful and we are standing together. So yeah, I think femininity it's beautiful and powerful and incredible. And yeah, being around women is always amazing, especially women warriors.
Great, thank you so much, Tara. And we're going to go to you, Freda, on the same question, but also on that, along those lines, if you could also add in, Freda, to your comment, there's a question to you about getting updated of the RCMP and the GasLink. Have they left your territory? Has the pipeline been halted? People are just sort of wondering what's actually going on in this moment, in addition to responding to the first question about the matriarchs and women's leadership at this time. Thank you.
I'll answer the one with the RCMP have not left the territory, even though they shut down what they call their SURG office. They had a trailer at 29 kilometer on the Forest Service Road. They shut that office down, but they still operate out of Houston, and they still escort CGL workers to the sites to ensure nobody blocks them or nobody stops them. And the RCMP continue to harass anybody that travels that road that appears to, for example, people that were wearing the Unist'ot'en Strong t-shirt, sweat jackets. A person was stopped saying that he fit the profile just because of the hoodie he was wearing, that somebody committed a crime. So they were trying to detain a person that was driving on the road because he was wearing one of the hoodies. And so the police are still harassing individuals, and the CGL has not stopped work, even though they say they cut down their workers from, I can't remember what the number was, 1,000 to 400 workers are still working. As I explained, we have photos that are on our Facebook page showing CGL vehicles with having 2 people to 3 people per vehicle traveling to the work sites. And we have on camera showing when we were doing the patrols to see if they were doing work behind our checkpoint. One of our supporters went back there and had to tell the workers, no, step back. He was coming too close to the vehicle to talk to her, and she had to ask him to step back and questioned him, don't you understand the social distancing? And he said he wasn't at liberty to answer those questions. Here's the card, you can call this number and they can answer your questions. So they aren't practicing the social distancing, so they are putting the community at risk because the motels are still full. There's the Pleasant Valley Motel and the Houston, I can't remember what the other motels, but they're still full of industry vehicles, and people are still on their website. They claim they cut back their workers and only local workers are working. So if only local workers are working, why would they need people to stay in motels if they're locals? That tells me they've come from elsewhere around the province and out of province. So these people are coming into these small communities and going back home. So they are likely spreading the virus because they're not even practicing social distancing. They're not taking it serious. And regarding the other question, for us, through our hereditary system, we follow our mothers. So all my children belong to my clan. But when my son marries, like for example, my son got married and he has a daughter, but his daughter is not from my clan. She belongs to another clan, to her mother's clan. So that's why for my family, it was the women who were sitting around a fire as we went to our territory that identified that we were losing more and more of our land. We were losing more of our clean waters. And it's because we were worried about our children and then their children and the children to
sorry,
come.
could I call you back?
Just go ahead, Freda.
Okay, so that's the connection why we follow our mothers, and we as mothers were concerned for the territory not being there to provide for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. And that's what inspired us to, we said, we have to do something. If we do nothing, we'll be telling stories about how moose meat tasted, how salmon tasted, and those won't be available to the next generations. And that would be a sad story for us to have to be telling it instead of showing our children and our grandchildren how to process a moose, how to process the salmon, how to protect the water, how to protect the land, so it's there and sustainable for your next generations. So that is how our system works and why it was the women that were standing up, because it is our responsibility as the moms to ensure that our children learn how to sustain themselves off the land and also to take care of it so it's there to sustain the next generations. So that's the connection and why you see women are the ones that are out in the front and doing what they need to do to try and get people educated so they can take up and help us teach and get people to get back to basics on learning. You only take what you need. You don't just keep take, because that's what corporation does. They just keep taking and they're not putting nothing back. So in the process, they're destroying and we're wiping out populations. Like you see a lot of documents about the caribou going to be wiped out because of this pipeline. And they're killing wolves in order to try and fix that. They say they're mitigating it, but it's the wrong way to do it. It's not going to fix the problem. They're not finding real solutions. So that's why you see women standing up and the ones that are out in the forefront, because we see it and we know that everything, our lives depend on sustainability of Mother Earth. Otherwise, we won't survive. Exactly.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you so much, Freda. I'm going to go to Eriel on the same question. I just wanted to mention also, we're having this question of the matriarchs and the role of women stepping up. But please note that we are completely welcoming to the knowledge of the LGBTQI community, transgender folks, gender nonconforming folks, two-spirited folks. I don't want to get those conversations mixed up. We are welcoming everyone's knowledge. Everyone in their different identity and their different genders are welcome, and everyone's carrying incredible knowledge. And all of that knowledge is key and important and vital and needs to be centered. I'm
going to be, can I speak up, Osprey, since I'm the person being accused of transphobia over and over again? Okay. So I can only speak as my experience. I can't speak on behalf of people that I'm not of. I will say that, in our culture, two-spirited people are complete unto themselves. So they don't need another spirit, like a male, female spirit to complete them. And there are many, many, many genders that are recognized in our community, like over a dozen different genders. It's a fluid reality. I can only speak from my perspective as a woman. I can't speak for a community that I'm not of. And when I say that, femininity to me is talking about the connection of life givers to the earth. That is my perspective. That is just on behalf of myself. I'm not speaking for communities that I'm not of. That does not mean that trans folks are not incredibly sacred and beautiful and powerful people. Those are people who are deeply, deeply respected in our communities. Those are people who are complete. Like they don't need anything. They don't need to be balanced because they are balanced. And so I just want to make that clear, but I'm very apologetic if I offended anybody. That was not my intention at all. I was only speaking on behalf of myself. Yes, and trans women are women. I'm only speaking on behalf of myself as a identifying woman. That is, I guess, a cis woman. That's how I identify myself. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Tara. And yeah, we are open, and thank you for those good words, Tara, to everyone and their identities and how they're all important. I wanted to go to Eriel, but I also wanted to, you could address that question as you wish, but also there's another question that you might want to pick up on as well. There is a relative from Ghana, Nigeria, and she's asking, do any of the speakers have suggestions for someone like myself whose ancestors have been stolen from their land and are missing that integral link to the strength of their ancestors? And this is a person from Ghana, Nigeria, asking if you have comments about that or want to weigh in at all about, these are tough questions, but here we are in these deep waters. So let's go for it. And anything about that and anything about the matriarchs you want to add. Thank you.
Yeah, so as far as like the matriarch and the patriarch and all that stuff goes, it's a complicated journey that I've been in as well. So I just want to say, like, the role of women is very powerful. It's a part of that reestablishing the balances of between the masculine and the feminine. Sometimes we talk about replacing patriarchy with matriarchy, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily the way either. I really feel that the balance between the masculine and the feminine is a part of the equalization that we need in order to achieve not just the harmonization of global climate stabilization, but our harmonization with the natural world, which is filled with all sorts of masculine, feminine spectrums across the sphere. And I know that I do have to acknowledge the fact that colonization in many cases has really distorted what patriarchy, like how patriarchy shows up in our cultures and in our ceremonies and in the ways in which we even speak. And English is a language that was imposed in a lot of our communities, and it's very difficult to transcribe the sentiments that come from our language around understanding masculine, feminine relationalities and how they show up across the spectrums in our community. But that said, I do think that patriarchy and the sort of the ways in which maleness and patriarchy has shown up over the last like 500 plus years has really contributed to this severe imbalance that we are faced with. And that's why we're seeing such a huge rush of the rise of women and the feminine. And again, feminine, that's an English word. I don't know if I'm like using it properly even in this context, but this idea that there's these imbalances in how we move forward. Like even in my own community, we were matriarchal, and there's a lot of conversation around like when we talk about bringing back the matriarch, how do we ensure that our men are protected within these conversations, because they are also just as much, they are also at extreme risk to the systems of oppression that we face. And then how do we ensure that their spirit, you know, and as someone who grew up a hardcore, hardline, I'm a woman, I'm gonna take back all the power, blah, and then I gave birth to a male child, and I struggled with what that meant as me as a woman who like kind of really, I'm gonna swear, shit on men for many years, and really recognizing that my son is a powerful and important being on this planet. And how do we balance and reconcile these imbalances between our relationships? And it was a really huge lesson for me. And, you know, really raising my son to also respect gender spectrum. You know, my son actually said to me one day when I said, "You'll always be my baby boy." He said, "You don't know that because maybe one day I'll be a girl." And so, you know, that we understand the spectrums of all of this stuff. And I just really, I know it's difficult and it's hard, and we get triggered when we feel that we are not seen in these conversations. So I just want to recognize the comments around trans women is really, really a deep conversation that continues to unfold and is a part of that reestablishing those balances. And so I'm really appreciate that. As far as the question around the disconnection through systems of, you know, colonization with the stealing of people and placing them other places, that is also a really long conversation that I think has been really percolating to the surface, at least here in the Americas, around like how we reconcile the fact that people don't even know where they came from, and generations of removal from where they lived, or even communities that have completely lost, like island nations that have sunk and they don't have those places of origin anymore. Like, where do we belong and how do we find and move and evolve? I think for me, one of the comments that rings the most strong to that sentiment, or that big question of where do we belong, is that even Indigenous cultures, cosmology, ideologies, these things that we talk about, they're not static. We're not talking about going back to something as the way it was, and that is the only way that we should be moving forward. But it's about using evolution. It's about evolving and realizing that the ways in which we evolve are not confined to the spectrums of the Western ideologies, and that evolution is much more expansive than we talk about it. And it involves the evolution of much more than just the physical natures of the data that we can see in the microorganisms, but it involves the spiritual and the mental well-being. And when we talk about reconnecting with place, that is part of it. And where and how we do that is going to change, because climate is forcing our communities off of our lands, or our lands are completely disappearing. And that will become a common thing for many people. And so we have to just figure out together through this messy conversation how we do that in a way that respects those that have been there for many generations and those that have been placed there or forced there, and around how we're going to navigate through the messy. But it comes from relationships. It comes from learning to listen to each other, learning to speak to each other, not just with the words, but with our whole selves.
Thank you so much, Eriel. That's very powerful. Thank you. We're coming up to the close of our call, and I just wanted to really thank our speakers for their incredible wisdom. I do want to just go ask Tara, Freda, Eriel, just for any closing comments in that order that you want to make, just so you have a chance to make any closing comment. I really want to also take a chance to thank everyone who's joined this conversation. We've had over 600 people on this call, and I know we're also live streaming. We've jumped into some really deep waters, but we need to, because These are all things that we are all learning. We need to learn more about. They're complicated. We're all educating each other, and the speakers have offered incredible wisdom and grace. And I also want to thank everyone who's contributing to the chat and really opening our eyes to, not triggering people or, not feeling included. That's certainly not anyone's intent. I think people can feel the sentiment of this conversation. We're getting educated by you. We're reading, we're digging in, we're listening. Everyone's learning, and everyone is working to be very respectful. So please know that, and we recognize you, we see you, everyone. So I would like to hand the floor back to Tara, then Freda, and to Eriel, just for some short closing comments, and we'll go ahead and close the call. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. It's been quite extraordinary. Go ahead, Tara, and then we'll go to Freda and then Eriel.
Yeah, and I guess I would start by saying I'll recognize again that it is never my intent to not be inclusive and to leave people out or to feel like they're not represented or not included. That tends to be the experience of Indigenous peoples in most spaces, is to not be included and to not have a seat or a voice. And so I sincerely apologize for coming across as exclusive. As my understanding and teachings, that's Two-Spirit people are just complete people, and so those are the people that we look to that have that knowledge just inside of themselves, that they are already living in balance. And I would close by saying, I started with saying that we are being afforded this moment to reflect and to think about what's really, really important to us. I hope that we are also able to really think about what we can do, what actions we can take, and how we put our prayers and our thoughts and our ideals into motion. How do we do that? I think one of the most powerful things we can do that honestly is, it might not be, talking about our carbon footprint or, committing to turning our urban space into a garden or something like that, although all those things are beautiful. But I think there's so much value in teaching each other, in learning those values and sharing those values, sharing the values of life, of living in balance, of what that really means. We're all in a trajectory, and we have this moment to be alive and to have this time on Earth. And so what are we going to do in that time? How are we going to grow, and what are we going to share in that time? And I think I get so much hope from seeing so many Indigenous youth, and youth generally, actually, just youth of all colors, that are thinking about, learning how to hunt, learning how to fish, learning how to connect to the earth in a different way, and questioning these systems instead of just accepting them. So questioning in a real way what colonialism is, and not just the words, but how does this actually impact our bodies and our lives, and what we think and what we're taught, which is very violent. That we're taught violence from a very young age, the violence of hurting our earth, the violence of endless theft, of extraction from each other, of not thinking about, who made my shoes and who made everything I own. I think we have a real duty and hope that comes from teaching each other, and from learning ourselves, and from being humble, and always striving to be better, and striving to be more, to be a more complete human. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you, Osprey, for convening this. I really, really appreciate it. And I love seeing all the beautiful faces, the women that are on front lines, Eriel and Freda, and I guess Faith is not here, but my heart's out to you. We think about you and pray about you often, and your struggles to protect your communities. So, miigwech.
Thank you so much, Tara, and for your incredible hard work on the front lines for a long time. You know, we have your full bio on our website. People should really check it out. I mean, Tara has done incredible work. To remind everyone, she's part of the founder of the Giniw Collective, and has been on that line 3, you know, did incredible work out at Standing Rock and is an amazing leader. And we're just so thankful for your work and your wisdom, and your just incredible strategic approach to all these things is deeply appreciated. Let's go ahead and hear Freda, some closing comments, and then Eriel. Thank you.
I just realized I forgot to mention that we constructed this huge healing center, and the reason why we decided to build a healing center was to bring people back to the land, our people. We realized that my family, we were all connected to the land because we got brought up that way. So we already had that connection to the land. And that is what stirred up the fight in us to protect those lands. So we're saying, wonder why there's not more of our own people doing what we're doing. And we realized that they don't have that same connection. So that was why we decided to build a healing center so that we can do land-based healing to bring our people back to the land and get them reacquainted and connected to the lands. And if they're connected to the lands, then they're going to protect the lands. There's the connection there. So we do have a big healing center that we've had a bunch of volunteers and donations come in to construct. And we were supposed to start a program this year, but because of the pipelines, we weren't able to start it. Then COVID came. We actually received a grant from the First Nations Health Authority to start running land-based healing programs because we were already doing it. And we're able to show that people were receiving healing just from being on the land. So we received a grant to do that, and we were unable to start it because of COVID-19. We have not been able to bring people out, teach them how to hunt beaver and teach them how to harvest medicines, harvest berries, so that if we could teach people how to reconnect with the land, then they will protect the land, because they'll see the resources and see how valid and how helpful they are to sustain themselves so that they will protect it.
Thank you so much, Freda. And Eriel, I understand you need to run, so
I do.
Please, you need to do.
I just want to say thank you, Osprey. It's, you know, WECAN's always been putting together some great speaking events, even in this pandemic world where we have to shift and pivot and adjust to the new world. Thanks for doing that. And Freda and Tara and Faith, really, really, really honored to just be on this panel with you all. And just really wanted to say, like, the final words is, like, someone asked a question of, like, oh, did Mother Earth, is this like she knew where this is like a cleansing? And I don't want to be like what some people are like eco-fascists. I'm not an eco-fascist. I do think that this is a time that has allowed us to look and reevaluate our lives, not just individually, but as a society. And I think that it's just part of the cycles of life. You know, we've been through many, many reckonings, whatever you want to call them, in the history of human life on this planet. And the planet itself is going to exist in many different iterations, and how we choose to spend our time is we're just sort of being confronted with that in this current iteration of our consciousness. I think it's a very interesting time to be living in, and I'm really honored to be able to be in such great company with such amazing people that are really trying to take hold of this moment and make the best of it, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. So masicho, hi, thank you. And I have to run. I really gotta go. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Eriel. And thank you, Freda, and to Faith, and to Tara. I mean, it's just been an extraordinary conversation, and all of you who have been listening in and adding to the conversation. There are many leaders on this call. We want to recognize your leadership. There's many folks who could have been speakers. We thank you for your leadership. And we're going to continue to have these calls. I just wanted to say that day after tomorrow, we're going to be having Indigenous women from Brazil and Ecuador sharing with us what's happening on the front lines in the Amazon. And I think that's going to be a really important time to support that leadership coming out of the Global South and hearing about both COVID and climate and Indigenous rights. So you're all invited to do that, and can check that out on our website. And there's been so much wisdom shared today I don't think I'm going to say a lot more, but I did want to end with a quote because I feel like it's something that also came through this time in this moment from a really powerful writer and thinker that some of you might know, Anirada Roy. And I'm just going to read a quote from a statement she made recently. "Nothing could be worse than a return to normality. Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It's a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. When we can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us, or we can walk through with lightly, with a little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it." And I feel like that's been a big part of the wisdom that's been shared here today is like, you know, we all know this is a major transformation in human consciousness, in our relationship with each other, in a relationship with Mother Earth, and that we need to take this time and do it. We can't go back to where we were because where we were was the problem. We're here. And like how we go from here to there, I deeply appreciate all the knowledge and wisdom that was shared today because it's a big part of that movement of here to there. And the knowledge that all of the Indigenous women shared today has been quite extraordinary. We will be putting together a link of all the different resources that the women shared, how you can contribute to their organizations, how you can learn from the different resources that they have shared and their knowledge and wisdom. And we thank you. I love you all very much. Thank you so much for being with us today. And know that we are praying. We are concerned for our relatives. We are concerned for everyone. And I want folks to not feel alone. We are in this together. And, you know, that's why we're having these calls so we can connect and be in community together because we don't want to be alone and we need to help each other out. So be kind. Let's keep up the good fight. Let's make this time count. Let's listen to Mother Earth and let's listen to these incredible women. Thank you, everyone, and more coming soon. Much love to all. Blessings.
Thank you, Osprey. That was nothing short of phenomenal to be able to just bear witness to these extraordinary women on the front lines of multiple fronts simultaneously with such a deep reverence for the earth, such a profound solidarity with one another, and such a clear vision of the kind of world we need to all be working toward. So I just want to thank you for convening this panel. This was a perfect way to initiate our 9 days of women's voices from around the world as we begin our summit, Humanity Rising. So tomorrow we'll meet again at the same time, every day, 7 days a week, between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock p.m. Central European Time, which is 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific Time in the western states of the United States. Just tune in. If you're registered, the link will work. So every day when it works, and then we'll have the recordings of this call and our other calls on YouTube, on our Ubiverse, and elsewhere. We're being live streamed on Awake TV. We have live streaming going on multiple channels from our partners. So there are many opportunities to see what we're doing live and to participate or to look at a recording. Pass it on to all your friends. We would appreciate any contribution that you would make. We spontaneously rose to the occasion of developing Humanity Rising as a response to the pandemic, but we would appreciate any support that you would be able to provide. So you just go to humanityrising.solutions and you'll see a little contribution button there at the bottom. It's all voluntary. Tomorrow, we're going to switch tonality, and we are going to be hosted by Osprey Ananas, who's part of the community at Convener in northern Italy. She's going to convene a panel of extraordinary women on the theme of rebelieving our world, community, creativity, and spirituality. And we will be contemplating from another point of view what extraordinary women have to say about the world beyond the pandemic. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate you tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you here again tomorrow. Bye for now.